Welcome back to the channel. This is Jeff Reads, and on this episode, I want to talk about a little book no one's really heard of, probably nobody's read, called Lord of the Rings. So I want to talk about my initial exposure to rings. Let's get some dates out of the way. Fellowship of the Ring, July 1954. The Two Towers, November that same year. I stumbled across them as a youth. I think I was in junior high, maybe 7th grade or 8th grade, I'm not sure. But I stumbled across them, and I want to share a little bit of my book collection. It's not anything to brag about, but I discovered this version of rings, so these paperbacks, which I bought recently off of eBay. So there's The Hobbit, Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King. And the artwork is kind of willy-nilly. The Fellowship of the Ring is, I guess, kind of is the Shire, right? And this author photo of Tolkien is one that was burned into my brain. As I just, this was the one they put on all the books back in the day. Two Towers, I guess this is supposed to be Fangorn Forest, but, it could be any kind of forest. Hobbit is the Barrels Out of Bond chapter, when Bilbo gets the hobbits out of bond, so that's kind of cool. And Return of the King is neat. This is a cool photo. This is a photo of Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower, and in the background, Mount Doom. Really neat. I don't know who the author of the photo is. You'd think if I have a channel that I would do a little research to find out who the jacket author was, and I did not. So there you go. So I had those paperbacks for a while. Then a friend got me, a family member I think, got me these 3 hardcovers. They originally were gotten to me with the movie versions of the dust jackets on them, and I was like, get rid of these, come on. But they're really nice, full cloth hardcover volumes. I really like them. I think I've read them a couple of times in this version, which I really like. I don't have a Hobbit though. But then I really like these, the Alan Lee trade paperbacks. These are beautiful, beautiful books. They're really nice artwork on each book, but the font and just the layout of the books and good flop, they're just really good quality paperbacks, I have to say. I really like these. So this is The Hobbit, a little picture of Gandalf there. Then you have Fellowship, which I think this is supposed to be Rivendell. And then Two Towers, which is his version of Orthanc. It's funny, you think that they got this from the movies, but actually the movies got the art from Alan Lee. He was a major contributor to the look of the films. And I believe Minas Tirith in Return of the King. So just beautiful volumes, a pleasure to read. My last read through for this show, I read from these. So my relationship to the books, to come back to that, again, I was in junior high, and they just, when I first, someone, of course, I think most of us, we were gifted these books. I don't know that, back in the day, there was you didn't know about books. When you were very young, too, you didn't really hear about books. You were gifted books by adults if you were lucky. And so I was gifted The Hobbit. And, starting to read The Hobbit as a kid, you're just like, in the hole in the ground, they lived The Hobbit. It's very proper English. It's very, it's just not what YA was like. I mean, some of the YA I remember back in the day is I read The Three Investigators, I read Encyclopedia Brown, I read Captain Gray by Avi. This was just a strange book, but as it unfolded, it just took over my imagination, and I ran out afterwards and grabbed up the other 3 versions from the bookstore, and it just took over my life for a while, like as a young teenager. And I was very awkward in school, not, very social. Probably most people who do booktube channels can relate. And the books were just unbelievable. I mean, it just took me to another place. I mean, probably between Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, I mean, they impacted me intensely as a person. There's no doubt that they had an incredible effect on my outlook, on just all kinds of things. So I've reread them probably half a dozen times, maybe more. I probably go back to them maybe I think in my youth, my 20s, maybe 30s, I read them probably every 2 or 3 years. And then I think once the movies came out, I kind of didn't read them as much, and I would just rewatch the movies. I got the extended versions on Blu-ray, and I would rewatch the movies every couple of years. And the movie started to take over. And so recently, when the Rings of Power TV show came on, which I started to watch, I thought, man, I haven't really gone back. They're talking about Second Age. This is all in the Silmarillion, and the appendix to Return of the King, which I think the show bought the rights to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which is and the Hobbit. So they have the Hobbit rights and they have the rights to the Lord of the Rings. So they get the appendix, whatever's in the appendix of Return of the King, they can use in the show. They can't use anything specifically from the Silmarillion. But if the books cover it, if the appendix in Return of the King covers it, they can use it. And I never made it through the Silmarillion. As much as a Tolkien fan I was, I still I never made it through that book. But so it's since this new show came on, and I won't talk about the show too much here. I'm watching it here and there, and it's not blowing me away, and it's not terrible. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. But I thought now would be a great time to revisit Rings. It's been a long time, and cold fall is coming. I always would like to read Rings in the fall or winter. Never really a summer read for me, I think. So I thought I would do a show covering the trilogy. So the first thing I want to talk about is something that I've come to really appreciate for a long time about the heroes in this book. These are counterintuitive heroes. So these are not heroes that win the day all the time. One thing that I've started to realize the more I've read these books, they're really like coalition builder heroes. They're heroes who fail well. They're not heroes that win these decisive victories in any part of Tolkien. And what's funny to me is that the genre of fantasy built upon Tolkien went right into heroes that were special, chosen one. They had all these special powers, and they find powerful swords, and they learn magic. And it seems like the fantasy that was built on Tolkien's legacy really didn't get at something that Tolkien was really powerfully, intuitively into his work. His characters are not these overwhelming winners. Who are the main characters? So Gandalf, very powerful character, right? Basically, what is his main job? Running around and enlisting aid from everywhere, putting coalitions together, getting people to fight, putting people together and doing all this stuff and running around on Shadowfax. He's the big, messenger. That's his big job. And he fights the Balrog, he loses. So in general, he's sort of a messenger, and I'll get more into him as we go. Aragorn is, again, he's kind of the leader of the band, but he's not overwhelmingly strong and doesn't decisively, overwhelmingly win things in any of the episodes that he's in as well. Merry and Pippin, their main thing as heroes, they rouse the group that goes and does do the decisive victory and does win, but they're more like coalition builders. They get the Ents to come into the battle. Merry helps Eowyn kill the Witch King of Angmar, right, by stabbing him behind the knee. but Eowyn kills him. Eowyn's probably the only character in the whole series that decisively kills a bad guy, like a significant bad guy, because she wants to, and straight on, not from some other incident that happens, which is kind of interesting. Pippin saves Faramir from being burned by Denethor, right, by running around telling other people to do it. And then, Gandalf comes in and actually saves him. So in a large sense, these characters fail a lot. Most of the time, they fail at what they do, and then they grow from that, and they fail better. And they kind of they beat the evil because they're not willing to take on the egoic kind of power of the enemy to beat the enemy, which is kind of, I think, a very subtle but brilliant thing in Tolkien, is that they're not willing to step up in power to meet Sauron. It's like, well, they're going to beat him their way. And this is another wonderful through line in the book about power. And really, they kind of win the whole thing very messily and very, barely do they win, because they all decide to kind of eschew ultimate power. Most characters who are presented with the means perhaps to achieve ultimate power, they don't take it. And because they don't take it, they're not able to win decisively and powerfully often, but they are able to win eventually. But it's a very subtle thing. When you look back on Rings, it's a very subtle kind of failing better, failing to victory. And I just, especially reading it now, when, between movies and television, I've read and seen, untold amounts of his copiers. I don't think anybody really gets that about Tolkien. I don't think anybody really understands. And it's the spiritual nature of the book and of the vying for power that I'll get into a little bit as well, that I think Tolkien, being a Christian and being very much, inculcated with this sense of what it means to be good, what it means to be evil, his version of it, influenced by Christianity, by Jesus, right? It's very much in the book, but it's not at all overt. But yet it is, if you look at these characters and how they act in the book, and how this is all, born out, it completely makes sense. So first, I'm going to talk about the characters that exemplify this theme of failing better and failing better. And then I'm going to just talk about the rest of the main characters, which kind of exemplify themes of friendship, and just kind of talk about them as characters. So let's start with the most significant character in the book, obviously Frodo Baggins, right? Let's take a look at Frodo's journey towards this, towards the end of the book, right? So he starts out not a chosen one. He's, if anyone was chosen in the book, it was the Hobbit. Maybe Bilbo was chosen by another power that was vying with Sauron for the ring and guided Bilbo to find the ring. So if anyone was chosen, is Bilbo. And when we start this book, the chosen one, Bilbo, is kind of done. He passes the ring on to Frodo, who's his heir. So he's gifted the ring. He bumbles his way through to Rivendell, making bad choices after bad choices. Let's go through the Old Forest. Not a great idea. Lost on the Barrow Downs. Like, they all screwed up on the Barrow Downs. They all got captured. They had to get rescued by Tom Bombadil. Frodo goes to Bree, gets drunk, and is dancing on a table when he knows the Black Riders are after him. Gets drunk and starts dancing on a table in the middle of an inn, slips, falls, the ring goes on. It makes a huge, commotion. The absolute opposite of what he should have done, which is basically go to his room and hang out there for a couple of nights, wait for Gandalf, and leave, right? And even Gandalf remarks in the beginning of book 2. So I'm not, when I say book 1, book 2, book 3, I'm not referring to Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, Return of the King. Tolkien wrote this in 6 books. There are 2 books in each volume. So Fellowship contains book 1 and 2. Two Towers contains books 3 and 4. And Return of the King contains books 5 and 6. So when you hear me say book, that's how I'm going to refer to it. But in chapter 1, many meetings, when they get to Rivendell, Gandalf says, yes, when Frodo wakes up, yes, I am here, and you are lucky to be here too, after all the absurd things you have done since you left home. Absolutely, right? So from there, so one thing he does do, one notable thing that Frodo does, is he resists the wound of the Black Rider. He gets stabbed on Amon Sul, Weathertop, by this Black Rider, and the point of the Black Rider's blade breaks off, tries to get to his heart, and he resists, and all of the elves and Gandalf remark that many, the strongest man would have probably succumbed to the wound. So his first kind of superpower, or his first hero power, is that he happens to be a hobbit. And hobbits seem to be a little more resistant to Sauron's evil than the average. So it's not necessarily that Frodo has these special powers. He just happens to be a hobbit, and all hobbits are kind of tough, like, because Bilbo resisted it for a long time as well. So that's the first kind of thing that shows up, and it's not necessarily about him. They go through Moria, and they go through Lothlorien. He's basically free. He doesn't make any big decisions. There are no big choices that he makes. He's just kind of like, he's along for the ride. He gets stabbed by the troll in Moria, but Bilbo gave him a coat of mail, so saved his butt. Otherwise, he would have been dead. So, gets out of that scrape barely. So then you get Frodo's kind of early spiritual development. This is where he is as a character. He's speaking with Gandalf about Gollum, and they realize that he's just caused so much mischief. And Frodo says, quote, "What a pity that Bilbo did not stab the vile creature when he had a chance." And Gandalf says, "Pity. It was pity that stayed his hand. Pity and mercy not to strike without need." And I'll read a little more of that quote as I get to a different discussion topic. But so Frodo at that point, he's pretty much failing his brains out. And he's like, oh, we should have just killed Gollum. He's just a pain in the butt. So there's no, he's nothing special in that department either, not showing any kind of moral wisdom. Then finally, when the breaking of the fellowship happens by the falls of Rhoros, he finally, for the first time in the book, steps up and shows his quality, because he realizes that Boromir came after him, wanted the ring, and he realized that he's got to do it on his own, that one by one, they're all going to drop if I don't get out of here. So that was the first time he plucked up some courage. So Frodo's kind of development starts at the very end of book 2, and then, starts to kick in there. So then there's he really starts to show his quality with the taming of Smeagol when they capture Gollum, and he, realizes that he's not going to kill him. He does, even though he thought Bilbo should have killed him, in that moment when he sees him, he pities him and he spares him, and he makes him swear in the ring not to do harm, and he uses him as a guide. So there's a moment when Frodo shows kind of his quality, and he kind of lets Gollum know. He's like, "Yeah, I know you're going to try and kill us at any moment, and I'm kind of speaking truth to you. And there's only one thing that you're going to respect, and that's the power of this ring, and you got to swear on it." And so Sam kind of watches him do all this, and he says, quote, and Tolkien writes, "Sam looked at his master with approval, but also with surprise. There was a look in his face and a tone in his voice that he had not known before. It had always been a notion of his that the kindness of dear Mr. Frodo was of such a high degree that it must imply a fair measure of blindness. Of course, he also firmly held the incompatible belief that Mr. Frodo was the wisest person in the world, with the possible exception of old Mr. Bilbo and of Gandalf. Gollum, in his own way, and with much more excuse as his acquaintance was much briefer, may have made a similar mistake, confusing kindness with blindness. At any rate, this speech abashed and terrified him. He groveled on the ground and could speak no clear words, but nice master." So there's the beginning of Frodo's, he's growing in power in a sense. But it's that kindness of his that is his main quality, which starts to come into play here and will be a deciding factor in most of his journey. Later in the book, they do a visual take on this. When Frodo is sleeping and Sam's looking on him, Tolkien writes, "Then, as he had kept watch, Sam had noticed that at times a light seemed to be shining faintly within. But now the light was even clearer and stronger. Frodo's face was peaceful, the marks of fear and care had left it, but it looked old and beautiful, as if the chiseling of the shaping years was now revealed in many fine lines that had before been hidden, though the identity of the face was not changed. Not that Sam Gamgee put it that way to himself. He shook his head as if finding words useless and murmured, 'I love him. He's like that, and sometimes it shines through somehow, but I love him, whether or no.'" So now you're getting a sense that there is some kind of spiritual dignity happening within inside of Frodo. Because of him, the ring is working on him, and he's resisting, and his spiritual growth now is starting to come forward. It's beautiful stuff. But again, he's not kicking ass and taking names. Frodo's growing, the ostensible hero of the story is growing subtly spiritually in the book. Nowhere, any of Tolkien's imitators and competition has anyone developed character, in a sense, in this way, in this very subtle, kind of beautiful, gentle way, when all around him is terrible and dark, and he's not trying to rise up in power to meet it head on. So again, he fails. He gets captured by Faramir, and I don't think if it wasn't for Sam speaking truth to Faramir about the ring and about Boromir, it's possible that Faramir would have brought him to Gondor. So Sam kind of saves his bacon. Then he allows Gollum to kind of lead him into the trap with Shelob. Sam has to step in and save him again. Remember, this is our main character, failing and being saved, being shepherded, making mistakes over and over and over again. And then, probably the most misunderstood part of this book and the most beautiful part of it, he gets to Mount Doom with the ring. He gets there and he decides, I'm taking it. So he fails. He absolutely fails in his quest. He succeeds because he takes the ring as far as he himself could actually take it. And I think what's beautiful about this, I'll get into this later when I talk more about the spiritual underpinnings of and the black and white of this book. But he fails. If it's not for Gollum jumping on him and biting the ring off his finger and then slipping and falling into Orodruin, the jig is up. You know what I mean? Like Gollum will take the ring and run. The ring wraiths will get him, give it to Sauron. Game over. Sauron won. The Western allies 0. So there's Frodo. So in terms of character, he the ultimate failure at the end of his quest. You can't say he ultimately failed because he refused to step into the shadow. I mean, at the end, he did. He definitely failed the spiritual test at the end, but he probably went as far as any living being could go. Even people like Gandalf, even the wise, powerful beings in this novel would not have gone as far and resisted the ring as long as he did. But even so, it wasn't enough. Like he didn't make it over the goal line. Someone had to grab him, and someone else had to finish the job. The most unlikely character in the world, right? Now, again, to me, Frodo comes complete and ascends into his new change when he gets back to the Shire. And there's a scouring of the Shire. Saruman gets to the Shire. He sets up camp. He brings all these men. The place is a shambles. He's taken it over pretty much. So Frodo comes back, and with the help of Merry and Pippin, they rouse all the hobbits. They drive the men out, and then they finally get Saruman out. And even then, all the stuff that Saruman had done. I don't know if it's Saruman or Saruman. It's probably Saruman. At the end, Saruman tries to kill him. He's walking by. They roust him out, and he's like, don't kill him. He was once great. Saruman walks away. He tries to stab Frodo. The blade is turned on the mithril coat. And even then, at that moment, Frodo's like, even now I wouldn't have him killed. And it takes Wormtongue. He kind of dies by his own evil because he's abased Wormtongue for so long, whatever. So there's a great spiritual side of that, which I'll get to later. But as a character, again, that's where Frodo that's his big win. He comes full circle from, we should have stabbed Bilbo when he had the chance, to even Saruman trying to kill him and failing, only because he was wearing a mithril coat. No. It's possible that there's a chance that he may find himself again in the future, and we must give him that chance. Like, wow, But, what a unusual hero's journey, and not mostly what you see in fantasy. So, and this will have echoes in a lot of the other characters. So let's get to the other characters. So Gandalf, a wonderful character. I do love the regular descriptions early on of him as a bent old man, troubled. That always telegraphed to me as a kid so much. Like, this guy knows what's going on in the wider world, and him being troubled and bent is kind of scary. Of like, man, what is going on out there that's made this very powerful being so worried about it all, But again, so to continue with the theme, he fails a lot. He completely fails to anticipate Saruman. Bumbled, walks right into the trap. It takes him forever to figure out that he had years to kind of figure out when Bilbo had the ring, and he knew the ring made Bilbo disappear. All those years that Bilbo had the ring, and then Frodo had the ring, like, it took him forever to figure out that was Sauron's ring. And so because of that, the guard on the Shire was kind of laxed, and the Black Riders were able to come in. Failed with Saruman, and he dies in combat with the Balrog. Obviously defeats the Balrog, but also at the cost of his life. He's gone. Now, we don't know how he would have fared with the Witch King of Angmar, because in the book, when the Witch King rides into Gondor after Grond has smashed the gate, Gandalf is there barring his way, and they're about to kind of contest their wills. But at that moment, Rohan blows their horn, and the riders start to come, and so the Witch King leaves and then is killed by Eowyn. So Tolkien never really tells us whether Gandalf would have survived an encounter with the Witch King. The only clue we have is the prophecy that no man can kill me. Now, technically, Gandalf isn't a man. He's one of the Maiar. They're kind of like archangels in Tolkien's world. There's Saruman, Radagast, Gandalf, and the mysterious blue wizards that make up the 5 Maiar. Or the Istari, I believe they're called as well. So we don't really know. But again, he was not overwhelmingly powerful. He was able to drive off the Black Riders. So he was powerful enough on Weathertop, from what we hear, to drive off the full 9. So in that instance, he seemed to be more powerful than all of them. But again, it was kind of told, and the way he told it was like, I kind of held them off that day. So it didn't seem super decisive that he was like incredible, the victory. Seemed it may have cost him as well. He's got a wicked sense of humor, Gandalf. I love his sense of humor. And I wonder if that's not a little bit of Tolkien himself stepping in with this kind of droll English humor. There's a great bit here in when they read in Fellowship of the Ring, in book 1, when they read a little blurb from Gandalf leaves a note for Frodo, and there's a great part where it's like PPS. I hope Butterburst sends this promptly. A worthy man, but his memory is like a lumber room. Things wanted, always buried. If he forgets, I shall roast him. So every once in a while, Gandalf comes out with a nice singer. And he also is very tender. He loves the Shire, and he has this great quote where he says, quote, "It would be a grievous blow to the world if the dark power overcame the Shire. If all your kind, jolly, stupid Bolgers, hornblowers, boffins, brace girdles, and the rest, not to mention the ridiculous Bagginses, became enslaved." So there's kind of a sense of Gandalf of like, he kind of knows what, kind of bumbling provincial ignorance is in the book. But he also knows that there is something beautiful and cherishable about it, and that he would protect it at all costs, which is pretty terrific. So then you have Aragorn. Okay, now Aragorn is ultimately, seemingly, our kind of uber-mensch hero here. He's very interesting when he's Strider. He becomes less interesting when he becomes Aragorn. And he's one of the few characters who does kind of acquire a little bit of power and a little bit of mastery. So, basically, though, he's the king in waiting. He's kind of the de facto leader of the group, and he never really doubts himself. The movies play up the self-doubt a little bit, but in the books, Aragorn never seems to doubt that he's going to do the right thing. And so he's not a very complex character for the most part. And he really comes through when he goes through the paths of the dead and rousts the army, and he is the Han Solo character, if I may, flip-flop my antecedents in terms of this metaphor. Where the battle of the siege of Gondor, he's the one who saves the day when all is lost, and he brings these the corsairs of Umbar, I guess, or something. Because in the book, the armies of the dead beat the pirates, and then they're able to enlist a whole bunch of other people in that region to get on the ships and come to Gondor. The dead don't come to Gondor. He releases them back earlier in the river. So they actually don't come to the city. It was smart of Peter Jackson to actually do it the way he did it, but in the book, not the case. So he wins the day there. And basically the best, even him as the kind of Ubermensch hero, the best thing that he can do at the end is to take all of the characters and all of the forces and march to the front of the Black Gate to draw out the armies from Mordor. So Frodo has his best shot. That's not like most fantasy novels. When the heroes get the talisman or the sword, or they do the thing, they become the powerful heroes who kind of vanquish, right? And to him, all his power is simply being used as a distraction for this tiny little character who's been failing his brains out up till now to drop the ring in Mordor, So he has some great moments when he talks about taking the Palantir, which are the crystal balls in the novels. He reveals himself to Sauron, and before then, we've really been frightened enough to see that, poor Pippin almost got caught looking into these things. But Aragorn was strong enough to be able to actually withstand Sauron's will and reveal himself. And that was kind of a cool power moment for Aragorn. That was about the most powerful thing he did. And the one moment of doubt in the book that I can recall is when he wasn't sure, the beginning of book 3, when Frodo has left with Sam and Merry and Pippin were captured. He doesn't know what to do. Should he go chase after Frodo and help him, or does he go after Merry and Pippin? So there's a little bit of doubt there. And because of that, it makes him a little bit human there, which was great. Obviously, he chooses to go after, Merry and Pippin instead. And he's very gallant with Eowyn, because Eowyn of Rohan falls in love with him. And one thing the books did not do well, sometimes Jackson did better stuff with the movies, which pisses me off, but it's true. There's no Eowyn in the books, except she's this, daughter given by Elrond to Aragorn when he's king. So she's basically, cattle, unfortunately, in this book. So you don't get a sense when Eowyn is making a play for him and he puts her off. You get maybe a tiny hint that there's someone else in the picture, but you're really not told who, except that he talks about the legend of Beren and Luthien, which is a very similar situation. I forget which was which, but one was an elf and one was a man, and the elf was a woman and sacrificed herself to be with this mortal lover. So that was a little foreshadowing of what was to happen, but it's very buried in the book. Like, he really doesn't go into it. But he's very gallant with Eowyn, and he kind of puts her off in a very nice way, and so I kind of like him there. Okay, so those are the characters that mostly exemplify the theme of failing better, and not being, world beaters. And now I wanted to talk about the rest of the main characters and kind of how I feel about them and why I think they work really well in the book. Sam, not much real. Sam is one of the few flat characters in the book. He, from day one, he gets caught listening. Gandalf sends him off with Frodo. He's pretty much Frodo's, servant, and that's that. And he's always there saving the day, and he's, a little comic relief once in a while. He's very funny. He loves Frodo to death. The only problem I've always had with Sam, though, is that, Frodo wasn't from Bag End, and Sam lived there. And Frodo kind of came up only recently that Bilbo kind of bring him up to live there. But when the book starts out, Sam really, right off the bat, is sort of like, I love him, he's my master. It's almost like their friendship kind of, I don't get a sense from the book that there was much of a friendship before the story, being that Frodo lived down in, Buckland, and he lived in Bag End. And so the fact that Sam becomes kind of his master and immediately loves him and wants to protect him and help him was always very strange to me. I mean, it's a nit that I have with the book, that I don't get it. In a sense, in Bag End, in all the things that are happening before the main story starts, you can tell that he's better friends with Merry and Pippin because they're from where he lives. So he's known them for a while, and the three of them seem to be friends. But Sam seems to be the odd one out. But all of a sudden, when Sam comes on, it's Sam and Frodo, Sam and Frodo. So it's an odd thing. But Sam is the classic, the hero's companion. Great character, but flat. So my sort of failing and learning with Sam doesn't really come into play because Sam just is kind of always does the right thing. So other characters, Merry and Pippin, have a nice little arc. At first, they're both bumbling complainers, very good-hearted, salt of the earth. Pippin's idiocy at Moria, dropping something into the well, possibly causes Gandalf's death. But they wound up maturing after seeing so much death and destruction. They mature wonderfully. Merry pledges himself to Theoden as a vassal of the Mark. And finds his way into the fight of the Siege of Gondor and winds up, helping Eowyn kill the Witch King of Angmar. So that's really awesome. When Pippin is confronted by Denethor and they talk about Boromir, he feels really, really guilty about Boromir's death. So pledges himself as a servant of Gondor. So they both are these kind of hapless, funny, buddy characters that both become very super serious. And I think there's a little metaphor here. They drink the water in Fangorn, which causes them to actually grow in stature as hobbits. And I feel like that's kind of metaphorically correct because they do grow in stature as well as characters. They become more responsible. They're very much responsible with the scouring of the Shire. They really, they come back, they have swords, and they're very much the martial leaders there and getting rid of the men that have taken over the Shire. So they've come full circle when they come back to the Shire as well. So they're terrific. Legolas and Gimli, wonderful. They go through a wonderful arc as well. They're against each other to beginning because of the two races, right? The dwarves and the elves hate each other. So then it starts to break down a little bit when they start to fight and they start to compare numbers. I loved that as a kid. Where at Helm's Deep, I think it starts where they, I've killed 20, I've killed 21. Really, 25, that still only counts as one, all this wonderful stuff. But there's very beautiful moments. Gimli's the one who really kind of changes more than Legolas. The elves tend to be, most of the elvish characters there's not much. They're these kind of almost divine beings. They don't really have, they don't really change much. There's not really much to them. They're just kind of these exalted beings in the book. So for these two, Gimli's the one who changes. And there's a beautiful moment in the books, which I'd forgotten or never remembered, when Gimli is struck by Lothlorien and by the beauty of Galadriel. So I'm going to read it to you because it's really cool. He says to Legolas, quote, "I have looked the last upon that which was fairest," he said to Legolas, his companion. "Henceforth I will call nothing fair unless it be her gift." He put his hand to his breast. "Tell me, Legolas, why did I come on this quest? Little did I know where the chief peril lay. Truly, Elrond spoke, saying that we could not foresee what we might meet upon our road. Torment in the dark was the danger that I feared, and it did not hold me back. But I would not have come had I known the danger of light and joy. Now I have taken my worst wound in this parting. Even if I were to go this night straight to the Dark Lord, alas for Gimli, son of Gloin. And then Legolas says some beautiful stuff. Nay, says Legolas, alas for us all, and for all that walk the world in these after days, for such is the way of it, to find and lose, as it seems to those whose boat is on the running stream. But I count you blessed, Gimli, son of Gloin, for your loss you suffer of your own free will. And you might have chosen otherwise, but you have not forsaken your companions, and the least reward that you shall have is the memory of Lothlorien shall remain ever clear and unstained in your heart, and shall neither fade nor grow stale. So this is a little bonding. The two of them start to come closer, which is wonderful. So yeah, so that's really awesome. And the glittering caves, which you find out later, I think after the war, it's all over, the two of them together, because since he's seen Lothlorien, now he says, okay, Legolas, I want you to see the glittering caves, and then you can take me to Fanghorn. So there's wonderful, this bridging together, and they remain together throughout the whole book, which is great. And then the last significant character I want to talk about is Gollum. And Gollum's an amazing character. He's this strange mystery. He evades elves and he evades Aragorn. He's a very powerful character in his stealth, in his way. He's resisted the ring for ages long, preternaturally strong. In a sense, he is the result of the ego with the ring. So the ring has kind of inflamed Gollum's ego to as far as it could go. But because Gollum doesn't have any real power, an ego that's fully inflamed without much will to power in the world just collapses in on itself. And so that's kind of, to me, what Gollum represents is the ring working in a very small way to corrupt and destroy something that had no real power to begin with. So instead of him creating lots of evil in the world like Sauron does, it all closes in on him and he just becomes insane. Just an insane addict after the ring and after this thing that he just wants. And he has no moral sense whatsoever. And he'll do pretty much anything to get what he wants. So yeah, but there's one moment in the book where there's a little flicker. There's a couple of moments with the two hobbits before they get to the Forbidden Pool. There's a moment in the book, and I want to read it to you because it's beautiful, where he almost emerges, Smeagol almost emerges back again. The movie played this up a lot more, but Tolkien only does it in a very small way. So Gollum he's watching Sam and Frodo sleep. This is when they're on their way up to Shelob, the stairs of Cirith Ungol. I'll read a little bit. And so Gollum found them hours later. When he returned, crawling and creeping down the path out of the gloom ahead, Sam sat propped against the stone, his head dropping sideways and his breathing heavy. In his lap lay Frodo's head, drowned deep in sleep. Upon his white forehead lay one of Sam's brown hands, and the other lay softly upon his master's breast. Peace was in both their faces. Gollum looked at them. A strange expression passed over his lean, hungry face. The gleam faded from his eyes, and they went dim and gray, old and tired. A spasm of pain seemed to twist him, and he turned away, peering back up towards the pass, shaking his head, as if engaged in some interior debate. Then he came back, and slowly, putting out a trembling hand, very cautiously, he touched Frodo's knee. But almost the touch was a caress. For a fleeting moment, could one of the sleepers have seen him, they would have thought that they beheld an old, weary hobbit, shrunken by the years that had carried him far beyond his time, beyond friends and kin and the fields and streams of youth, as an old, starved, pitiable thing. But Sam wakes up and immediately suspects him, and all that's gone, But what a beautiful a little bit of the kindness that Frodo showed him in that journey was a small little window, and Gollum kind of opened up a crack. And there was no chance that was going to last. But that was a beautiful thing, even for Gollum. Again, in most fantasy tropes, the bad guys are the bad guys, the good guys are the good guys. So, I don't know. Again, another subtle, beautiful thing about this. All right, so this ends part one of my Lord of the Rings analysis. I was going to do this as one YouTube video, but I'm realizing it's going pretty long, and I don't know that folks are going to hang in there for the whole thing. So part two, I'm going to talk about the nature of the ring, the nature of evil and good in Tolkien's universe, and some other fun things that I love about the book, and why I think, importantly, why I think Lord of the Rings is a classic and why it will stand the test of time still and for however long to come. So thanks for watching. See you next time.